Welcome, friends. Today's conversation is a conversation. Today we have Isa Silver with us, and Human Design found Isa in 2016, and she's got a very interesting story around health and wellness and the primary health system, and we're going to explore that today. So I would really love for the audience here, definitely tap into this conversation. I think it's a conversation that you're not going to hear in many places in the human design community, as per Isa's and I conversation before I press record. And Isa's a manifester, so a splenic manifester. And I think it's important to recognize that manifestors are here to initiate us. So just sit back and start to recognize where the initiation is happening for you in this conversation. And where it may or may not lead you. All right, welcome, Isa. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, thank you, Leann. I did initiate this conversation because I heard you say something that I hadn't heard from anybody else in human design, and I've been trying to initiate a conversation about the topic for several years. And you said something like, not being able, maybe you remember your quote, something like, you can't really plug into your own brain when your gut biome is off track. Was that about what you said? Okay, so the gut biome is this thing and it's not human. And I've been learning about it since I started learning about human design. And in fact, the person who got me on my gut healing track was the person who introduced me to human design.
Okay.
I'm also a manifester, and a 6-2 manifester, in fact. And so I was in a process of healing like a dysbiotic gut. I had no functional gut ecosystem when I met human design. So I was like empty on that inside. And in the coming years, I redeveloped this biome, like made it a healthy biome, one that could digest bread, which I hadn't been able to do for years, for example. And then by late 2018, I started my PHS eating. And since then, PHS eating has basically maintained my gut health, but I'm always paying attention to the vibes like in my belly and kind of feeding them and noticing, oh, I've gone off on this kind of carbohydrate track or this caffeine track, and then kind of bringing it back to this medium place. And based on that experience, I once saw a question which I thought was really relevant to our conversation. And the question was, why is it so hard to start your PHS eating? And somebody said, gut biome, question mark. And I said, yes, that's the answer. The gut biome is a thing. It's this entity. And I want you to ask me questions about it because I know you know some. And I don't see that in the PHS teaching. That wasn't anything that Ra ever talked about as far as I know. And in fact, I don't even think the science really existed at the time he was talking. But right now, it's like one of the hottest topics in science, like 2023 hot topics in science. The gut biome is huge, and all kinds of people are saying it affects everything about our emotionality and our brain, and we're controlled by our gut biome. And I have plenty of evidence of that in my experience. But I don't see anybody in human design who's trying to get into PHS eating seeing that. So I'd like to talk to more people. I'd like to start that conversation. I'd like people to tell me their stories. So
yes.
I'll stop it there. Can you give me a question from there?
Sure. Are you okay if I pull up your design?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
I just want to show it to the audience, so that you recognize the energy that this is coming towards you with. And I, of course, being in design for as long as I have been, I watch the design and I watch how it truly pops off the page and has these conversations with us.
Right.
And what I love here is, this is the space right here. This is the mouth and the stomach. And that has been such a big part of the last 411 years, with the cross of planning and the cross of Maya being present in our background frequency. How we became quote unquote controlled by authority figures was through this manipulation of our gut, of our food system.
That is really interesting. That's really pretty deep. Do you want to share more details on how you see that? Yeah. Because on the one hand, like more food has been put out to everyone, right? But yet maybe
Right.
the distribution of the quality of the food and certainly the quality of the food for the has gone down in a lot of ways. It's more dead than it used to be, right? So I'm curious what you think of what brought you to that conclusion. It's unique.
Um, so I get it. In PHS, Raw always said it doesn't really matter about the food that you eat. It just
Right.
is the circumstance and the condition.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
However, when we look at where we're going and we recognize that the physical bodies that the rave will have, they're so sensitive. I feel as though the frequency of the food and the chemical composition of the food is so important, because how do I want to say this? The more simulated the food, the more processed the food,
Hmm.
the more processed the process is going to be for these raised kids, I feel.
Interesting. Yeah.
You can, it's not, I'm not here to convince you of anything. I recognize that, like, how far away from nature do we want to get? That's my question. Because
Ah,
nature's providing us, right, with all the medicine. It provides us with everything that we need. And I feel as though the cross of planning has moved us so far away from nature, especially in the last 40 years, that how they did that was through the processing of what nature has available for us. That's what I see.
interesting. Uh-huh. Okay, well, my mind hasn't gone all of those places, but I do understand there's no clarity about what these beings, the raves, are going to eat. And their ability to digest meat apparently isn't going to be there because of a different, setup down there. Um, so I've heard of one other person talking about like maybe they're going to be fed intravenously. Um, but wow. Hmm, okay. I don't know what to say about that one. Okay, honestly. But I do know that I mean, what a human can even digest depends on their biome. Like
Mhm.
the human alone can't actually digest any carbohydrate. We only can digest a carbohydrate if we're carrying the bacteria, the probiotic things, the entities that will break it down. So there are people, that basically just, and I couldn't, and I know because like I went from raw vegan to I had to go full paleo to recover my gut biome. And I remember how it hurt when I tried to eat a piece of lettuce because I could feel the lettuce scraping the inside of my raw gut. Uh-huh. And touch, I think, and I've talked to other touch cognition people, I think us touch people have extra feeling on the inside of our guts because that lining is just like our skin. So I felt every little thing go through there. And to go back to what you're saying about the quality of food, I have lived now and without vegetables for months and been okay. I've understood, okay, my all my mental things about I have to eat organic smoothie every day was gone. But when I do get the organic vegetables and I can digest them all now, there is a feeling like a happy feeling in my gut. Not just there's enough food, but there's a frequency in my guts that is vibrant compared to just eating corn tortillas every day or something. So, okay,
Okay.
do you want to say something about low determination and touch?
Well, and like bringing into the conversation about carbohydrates. So, Raw worked with Martin Grassinger,
Yeah,
who's a naturopath, right? And
yeah.
and really talking about how the carbohydrates and the mass and the heavy weight of
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrates is
Mm-hmm.
important for the emotional system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, right, to hear this,
The
because I can
heavy,
I can
actually,
recognize. Go ahead.
did you say the heavy mass of carbohydrates, like a big chunk of bread, like that kind of mass?
So more so like I guess maybe the fiber,
Huh?
the mass and the fiber that can go through the gut biome, through the
Uh-huh.
emotional center, help in his process and watching it through people. I don't
Uh-huh.
know how many people he tested. But what he recognized was it allowed them to tap into their emotional wave differently and with more
Mhm.
clarity when there was some mass there for that digestive system to start to um not I guess maybe fix the wave, but
Huh?
get to clarity differently.
Interesting. That's okay. So Martin Grassinger is like somebody I would like to talk to. Like he's probably
Yeah.
already prepared to have this conversation, though I haven't
Yes.
heard him talk on this topic exactly. But that's fascinating because you see how open I am on the surface level emotionally,
Yeah.
but my cognition is emotional. And so
Yeah.
my understanding of this, and I do have, I mean, everything between my belly button and my pubic bone and everything that happens there has an emotional component to it. I do notice that very much, and there are times when it feels like it's just time to eat a bunch of mass and move stuff through, and other times when it feels like I just want to eat butter today, just something
Mm.
just fatty or bone broth, that kind of thing. There are definitely, and it's very mood related. Um, but I've only learned this kind of thing in recent years, especially because I only pretty much only eat alone now since low sound
Mm.
because I can't eat in restaurants. I can't eat in a conditioning environment, basically. So I've gotten way more sensitive that way.
Okay. Love it. Um, So interesting because the 5342 is healthy fats. So I love that you just indicated, there's times where you need mass. And most likely what's going on there is like this wisdom that can happen through the friends and family, the
Hmm.
clarity in that emotionality. But the 42 and the 53, this is all about fats that
Hmm.
allow us to process the cycles of life.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay, because coming into like when I before I met human design, I'd been vegan for some years and it seemed a good healthy thing at
Mm.
first. I got like more slender and things looked good for a long time. But long story short, by the time I got to Costa Rica 2015, I didn't know that's what was going wrong, but my guts were really going quite wrong. They just emptied way too much and food didn't stay around. And so the diet to seal my gut lining and repair what had happened there involved a lot of grass-fed butter and bone broth. And I had never eaten grass-fed butter, and I couldn't believe how my body would just take a spoon and I would just spoon butter into my mouth. And the person who was kind of coaching me or whatever who introduced me to it, he's like, "Well, your body needs it for sure." And I did have about a year or so where butter was a constant thing. And then I've gone away from it and come back to it. But having been vegan, I had a mental idea that all of those fats were bad for me and that were going to hurt me. But I actually became more slender by eating more fat, but the certain kind of fat. I didn't know that it was part of the process of maturation to eat these
Yep.
really advanced fats. But now I'm like all about advanced
Yeah.
fats. Yeah,
Yep.
interesting. Okay, so down
Yeah.
there, but what about does my gate 3 south node have a food angle to it also that you see?
So the gate 3 is actually the 60 and the 3 is all about glucose.
Yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh.
So this is like getting that because it works on like an on and off switch, right? So planes for so long and then turns on and then planes and then turns on.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, those spikes require a lot of glucose because really the brain is really coming online in those times of creativity, right? That right brain is just like steeped in the creativity. So it needs that quick hit of glucose in order to
Mm-hmm.
spike that creativity. And
Yeah.
in times of melancholy, like again, I want to, go back to uh, the cross of planning was doing this, but it was all to get us to this space. Like, don't get me wrong, the cross of planning and Maya it's not that it was bad or good or whatever it was. It was all to get us to this space so we could actually recognize all of this, I think, in ourselves. But you'll see where, especially with children, feeding sugar, right, gets to this hyper high, like, right? And a lot of people will use sugar in those moments where they want creativity.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the other thing that you were talking about was touch as well, and that cognition. What do you notice? So I'm a cattle rancher, okay, in Alberta.
Cattle rancher.
So
Oh, okay. Oh wow.
yes,
Okay.
yep,
Northern cattle. Okay. Uh-huh.
yeah, and my cows get like, they only get grass, right? So they don't get corn or grain, which again would spike them into like anger and all that kind of stuff. They don't get vaccines, they don't get antibiotics or hormones unless like it's a real bad infection, right? If I
Oh,
have to use
fantastic.
antibiotics, then I will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. I had no
But
idea about this about you, but it's like I'm really grateful to the people who've raised the cows that have helped me heal my body. So thank you.
you're
I could have
welcome.
never imagined saying that 10 years ago, but I'm like, I needed those bones. I needed that butter. I needed that person who
Yeah,
cared to raise their animals that way so that my body could be healed by them. Yeah.
totally. I find that so important, and that's where the touch, um, and where I'm leading here with this question is like recognizing the difference between a say per se, like an animal that's raised in, um, confinement and force fed and all that stuff versus an animal that's out on the range, they're grass fed, they're doing their thing, right? They're all totally natural. Have you noticed, even with the vegetables too, right? When you talked about organic vegetables versus non-organic vegetables,
Mhm.
like, tell me a little bit about that process, and how does that touch when you're touching that food or looking at that frequency or feeling that frequency? What have you noticed with that?
Yeah, well, I do pick up my vegetables, right? Like, and I can't imagine actually cooking with vegetables that I didn't pick up, that I didn't select, actually. I mean, I've never had somebody shop for me, but when I think about it, I would be like, I think the process of assimilation starts when I'm picking them up. And I've been lucky that there've been basically three organic farmers in my life in the last 15 years that
Mm.
have been the majority of my vegetables. And it's really joyful for me to open up that CSA box or come home from that market. And like that's just a joyful thing. And I like to touch them. I like to see them. And it's just exciting to work with. And so there is a frequency. But I will also say, so there's that. And it happens with animal parts too, right? I can see, I can smell. There's all kinds of different frequencies around that. But I will also say that I used to have this mental thing that I couldn't take in some kind of conventional food ever, right? And that mental part is gone now. So I do actually notice it and I do feel it and I make like little noises like, oh my goodness, I'm boiling these beautiful carrots, like I get excited. Um, but like I'm remembering being in an airport like 6, 8 months ago, and really McDonald's was the best option. And I had found a quiet corner where I could eat. So I got this McDonald's hamburger and I haven't eaten one for I don't know. I don't even know like how many years, 10 years. And I go to my
Mhm.
quiet corner and I ate it and everything was fine. Like I didn't have a mental breakdown. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like I was doing something bad to myself. Um, but yeah, there is an energy, but I don't know that everybody feels that. I don't know if if you don't have that emotional binary on your cognition, if you would feel that, like I don't know if that's everyone.
Yeah.
And it
Um,
doesn't seem like it would be an advantage actually as a human because you have to be really privileged to have access to this kind of produce or really poor in a lot of parts of the world, like a lot of really poor people, like people that live around me, they do have their own food. So they have that good
yes.
vibe food, but then they also eat so much fruit and so much coffee that they're kind of pre-diabetic all the time, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's hard to think about all that together. Personal
Yes,
view is really
yeah,
helping me. I get real narrow on, is the food for me or not?
right.
Or
Yeah.
for the family, because it's my only emotional outlet apparently is making food for the family, but I don't have a family to make food for, so that's kind of weird.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yep, yep. And yeah, like I have feeling, you have touch. So
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes, maybe we have that
basically
common.
it's, like I know it, right? When I'm connecting with my food, like I know, oh, I'm not gonna ingest this. I just am
Yeah.
not. And
Yeah.
and if I force myself to, immediately I know that, okay, that was totally not correct, right?
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because and again, I've been trusting that for so long that um it's just a reality. But I want to go to this space of biome because you were teaching me
Yeah.
some things before the call.
Okay.
So I am going to take your chart off of here, but it was good
Huh?
to be able to see it. And if anybody, as they're listening, just can have a frequency of who and what you are and how you're teaching. So tell me more about this biome, because when we were having the conversation before I press record, you were giving me some statistics on like how much square footage I guess there is inside of our in like from our mouth to our sphincter. It's like what, tell me about that square footage that goes on
Sure.
there and what goes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start with just to the word biome, we can consider it's just like a forest or even like it's an ecosystem of a lot of different components, a lot of different types of life in it. And so, if you look at like a golf course, there's like one type of grass and three types of trees, golf course. But if you were looking at like an old growth forest or maybe a healthy jungle, there's tens, 20s, hundreds of types of species filling in all the different places. And you can see like golf course is this controlled, kind of sterile thing, maybe, but the comparison to an old growth forest that has all different things. So it's a mix of non-human life, and it is like between the stomach and the anus. I say I'm a amateur expert on the mouth to anus track, okay? But I'll just say for now that the stomach to the anus is not human. It's it's these other it's this ecosystem which performs best if it's got a lot of diversity, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
and it's taking the outside world that we put in through our mouth, because that's how the outside world gets in, but it goes into this like other room basically. So that track, I forget how long it is. I want to say it's like 15 meters of intestines. But whatever it is, if you took that tube and you unfolded it, and inside of the tube is like all these little cilia, right, that are reaching out to get the information or get the surface area onto the stuff moving through. If you opened that up and laid it all out, the surface area of your biome would be at least a very large room, if not as large as a tennis court. So even if I'm alone in my own aura, if I have food in my gut that is conditioning me, from my perspective, it's like I'm being in a room with somebody who's conditioning me. But I'm ignorant of it because it's down in there and we're all pretty ignorant of what that tube is. So I've come to the conclusion, like somebody else suggested to me, that when that biome is set in a certain way, it might not want to do PHS eating or any diet, because that biome's like, we are here and we want to eat these kinds of things. We're a bread and peanut butter biome. That's all we want to eat is bread and peanut butter, and we're just going to do that. So you're conditioned to be a bread and peanut butter person. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm not judging any of the
mm-mm,
content of it. I'm
mm-mm.
just saying that whatever that ecosystem wants to eat is oftentimes what people think they want to eat. But they didn't maybe even have any control over the development of their ecosystem because it started when they were born. Whether you were a C-section baby or not, how much antibiotics you had in your life, whether you had birth control, whether you had other kinds of antibiotics, birth control, birth control, birth control. I mean, that really messes up all levels of the chemistry. So that ecosystem is something that is conditioning you all the time, but you probably never did anything intentional to change it. And it's telling you what to eat. That's my perspective on what's happening there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gone through cleansing of that at times, but then also had it totally fail and recognized, oh, you can't just have nothing there. You can't eat anything if you don't have a biome, except bone broth. That's really pretty much the only thing you can eat if you don't have a system is bone broth. I've been there. Did that
Okay.
answer?
Yes. And now I want to keep going a little farther here. So, what I love is like the analogy of, like the conditioning field of a golf course, right? Like nature's being groomed or controlled or conditioned, right?
Very, very right. Yeah.
Yeah, versus, an old growth forest or jungle that nature will do what it needs to do what it needs to do to be healthy.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? So tell me a little bit more about like how you recognized the total like destruction of your biome and that you didn't have an ecosystem to building it back up. Like what did that look like as a manifester, splenic, who is like your whole focus is on wellness, right? Through your design. So much of it is through wellness. However, how do we learn wellness? To not be well, right? So we can
Yeah.
learn wellness. So,
Yeah.
share this little journey of how you
Okay.
got here. What was the transformation?
Well, I'll go back to the first time I did anything to pay attention to my gut was in 2010. I did this cleanse, like this really popular cleanse that involved a bunch of steps. Basically, it was eating raw food only for some weeks while also doing other things that moved things out of the gut tract, dissolved stuff in the gut tract, and moved a lot through. Okay, so then I got to understand, wow, I can like not eat for days and there's still stuff coming out of my butt, and like stuff really adds up in there. So I got to have an experience of a controlled bringing it down. But then, and that kicked off my vegan streak. And then in 2015, when I arrived in Costa Rica, it was like heaven for raw vegan people. So that was what I sought out in other people was the community of raw vegan people. But then I noticed around Christmas time, I was real social in 2015 when I first got here, and things were just really uncomfortable in my gut. So it was really bloated, or it was coming out too fast, and things just weren't right. And I told the raw vegan guru guy, and he's like, "Oh, eat more raw, this, whatever." Okay. But then what happened was in February, I contracted a virus or a parasite. Like a bunch of other people had this, like diarrhea inducing thing. But for me, it was I couldn't leave the toilet for 24 hours. I had to lay down on the floor, like just nothing would stay, nothing would stay. And that got me in touch with somebody who could put me on this diet, the GAPS diet, to try to create this new gut biome. I didn't know what was going on, but I just knew that nothing could stay at all. So I was just drinking coconut water, and then bone broth got to me. And I got on a diet called the GAPS diet. It's called the Gut and Psychology Syndrome. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
Okay, so this is Gut and Psychology Syndrome, GAPS diet, developed by somebody named Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. And she wrote the book called Nutritionally Correct. No, that's not her, somebody else. But you know that book, Nutritionally Correct?
No, I
Anyway,
don't
this is
know.
okay, so that's a book that teaches modern people how to get value out of animal products, like the value of bone broth, the value of eating a cow stomach, like and what the traditional value of animal-based food was. And so in her diet, the whole goal is to seal the gut because if it's porous, then you're really in trouble. If it's porous, leaky gut, that's a lot of mental illness. Is that undigested food from the gut tract is going through the gut straight into the blood. And when that food goes into the blood, the T cells are like attack, attack, attack. And so at the mental level, this person's going crazy because they have actually a poison in their blood. And then the T cells are also attacking it, so they're autoimmune crazy. So I had a bunch of autoimmune issues for a lot of years, including the gluten allergy. I didn't know it was that. So the first level of healing the body is actually making sure that your gut tract is sealed. And that's a physical process, building up the molecules that let the wall be porous, like be whole. So that takes months. Like, and you can't eat a piece of lettuce because you can't eat fruit without going crazy. And I know because I was a month into this diet. I was just eating like basically butter and yogurt and bone broth for a month. And then it was my birthday, April 10th, and I ate a banana and a piece of cake, and I was so mentally screwed for like a week because my body just didn't know what to do with the carbs. And I was like, you're kidding. 3 months later, I eat a banana and I'm like, woo, for an afternoon, but then by the next day I'm okay. So I literally got to see that a single banana could change my mental state and my emotional state. So the first level was sealing the gut. And then once it's sealed, then you're continuously introducing the probiotics that will help digest carbohydrates, but you can only do it really slowly. So in the meanwhile, you're eating just fats and some protein because your body doesn't need the biome to break down something like bone broth. It's already available. It's been broken down by the heat process and turned into a molecule that the blood can straight take. But any kind of carbohydrate, you got to have the ecosystem that can turn the carbohydrate into the components that can go into the blood safely. Um, so my actual experience with that was that uh, I had no choice but to do that diet. I mean, I was no choice. And but within a year, I went to Asia and I didn't eat rice, for example. I didn't eat rice in Asia because I was afraid of overcarbing myself. Okay. And then the worst thing I could imagine happened. I got an infection, a MRSA infection, and was forced to go to a hospital and went on super duper antibiotics, like intravenous, for like, and I could feel. I mean, when I saw it, I just saw it go in, and I could just feel like I'm reaching down, touching my abdomen, like I had been mowed. Like there was this pain wave that went through my gut. But anyway, eventually I did get to the other side of all of that, and I can eat everything. I can eat everything now. I can eat junk. I can eat whatever. I just can't eat when other people are talking or when the noises are wrong. And that's my PHS thing. So that was a lot of story, but do you want to ask any questions about details or anything?
I just love it. And of course, I'm going to go back to your design here quickly because
Sure,
of
please.
course
Yeah.
you have the 44th
Yeah.
page.
Do you want to show people so they can learn from that?
Sure.
Oh, the 44th. I don't know where you're going with 44, so I'm curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just share it again. It's so fun, right? So of course, what do we have here? The unusualness.
Uh-huh.
And the 44. So the 44 is, and the 26. This is the immune system, right? Where the T cells and the immunology like really takes hold here. And you know, on the surface level, we can even look at this as sales. It's like a persuasion. It's all of this stuff. So we go from like, what are we putting in to what's the immune system doing? And that autoimmune aspect that you're talking about, basically, without healing that gut, this immune system can't be well. And then what happens, like, you know, what's the connection point? Of course, the material plane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I've never looked at it that way, but I love that you're saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I spend probably a disproportionate quantity of my money on my food, but I only matter if I feel good in my skin, and I simply don't feel good if that's wrong. Now I can eat just rice and coconut oil, but at least coconut oil gives me this kind of fat that makes it feel like I ate the right thing. If I just ate rice, only the carbs, it wouldn't feel sustainable. I would get kind of wacky feeling. I'd rather go into ketosis. I'd rather just not eat at all than to eat only the carbs. That's
yeah. And that's I think, you know, we're not throwing in insulin here, but I think that insulin and leptin and the resistances that happen there as well are a big part of that carbohydrate aspect too. and that
Ah,
sugar
wow.
aspect, right?
Uh-huh.
So when I like lean into just doing carnivore, because I have the access to the best, of course, in
Yeah.
my opinion, the best meat on the whole planet.
Uh-huh.
Um, when I lean into that and then I come out of that and I put some carbohydrates in, I can feel my insulin level just
Mm-hmm.
go crazy too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
very interesting
Mm-hmm.
how you talk about that, right? And watching how um you have three parts left, but your brain body system says, no, 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 we want to fast. Because
Mm-hmm.
that right passive body loves that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, I also recognize that I feed myself emotional emotions, right? That's a big part
Mhm.
of what my interaction with my emotional self is just putting the right thing into my mouth. I do recognize that. That is a kind of self-love. Yeah. And maybe that's just bread and butter and honey, but mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts, as Ra talks about how, we're no longer gonna be eating animals, blah, 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 the 1949 breaking down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Because again, as a cattle rancher and someone who really recognizes how clean red meat and bone broth and tallow and, all that yummy stuff and grass-fed butter and all of that is really important to us as humans.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts there on that breakdown or breaking of that 1949? What are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, it just made me think about how more people probably than ever have had access to red meat, like proportionally, you know what I mean? Like the cross of planning did make it possible that there's more red meat for more people. So more, it used to be maybe the peasants, the serfs, they didn't get maybe the red meat as much. I don't know. I mean, I really don't. But I'm just imagining that the distribution of the quantity of meat is greater than ever before. But the red meat has that 1949 connection, like the spirituality of the relationship between the human and the animal, the mammal. And it's the mammal. It's only the mammal, right? I mean, this isn't an
Yeah,
issue for the chickens and the fish and stuff, right? So that
right.
relationship between the human and the mammal is going away, right? Like that particular relationship. So where is this? What was your question? Is where is it going?
So how
What
do you
will?
see, yeah, like how do you see like what you use to heal yourself
Mhm.
versus what's going
Yeah.
on now where we're gonna, and I don't know, this is a prediction in Ra's, view. Um, I have my thoughts about it, but
I
like,
I'm seeing a separating of people that still have this, and I'm three parts left, so I'm still kind of quite old-fashioned human, right? I'm very quite
yeah,
strategic. My only futuristic part is the brain that obviously said, "Holy shit, I can't do any of what you were doing. So you have to change everything and learn a whole different way." I mean, I had to learn a whole different way of feeding myself. But And are we talking about the raves in particular? Because the humans that remain, okay, so we're going to keep having more humans, right? And I
mm-hmm,
don't know what the
mm-hmm,
percentage
mm-hmm,
of the births are going to be, but some of those humans are still going to want to eat animals, but fewer and fewer of them are going to have access to that source, right? Because as the cross of planning takes away all the cheap carbohydrates, the delivery systems, so it's only going to be maybe actually in tribes of people like you and your neighbors are going to have cows because you have cows and you have that knowledge and you have those systems in place. But the blue collar worker who depended on the grocery store for their meat maybe isn't going to have that because all of the systems that it took to feed the corn to those cows and get that meat from Iowa to their grocery store, those are all the ones breaking down. So maybe it's going to be way more regional, and maybe we're actually going to get more tribal, those of us who can still eat it. I mean, that's actually how I'm thinking about where I live right now. I live around a lot of extremely uneducated people, right? Like they can talk, they can read, but maybe sixth or eighth grade level, education. But I can talk to them about whether I can buy half a cow from them. And when I think about
mm-hmm,
like the internet going down, I think my safety is in my ability to talk to my neighbors about buying animals from them.
yeah.
So that's the actual story in my life. Um, does that address anything?
Yeah, yeah, it like, I
Oh, I know
recognize
another
that
level
as,
of that. Oh, I know another level I
yes,
want to say.
go
Okay,
ahead.
so the next
Yeah,
the
go
next
ahead.
level is, but if you think about, going towards rightness and towards rightness and towards rightness, I mean, like the right environment is artificial shores. It's artificial shores, and there's all this artificial stuff coming online. And so the brain of the human body is kind of going away. It's almost, does that make sense? And we're able to put more of our mind into AI, and our mind, like our outsourcing the mindy, brainy part, and the actual body. I don't know. I've gotten lost in my own thinking. Can you help me?
And that's where, like, before I press record, we were kind of playing in this realm of, like, how much of this is natural and how much of the transformation is man-made.
Well, is there a separation? Isn't separation the illusion?
Yeah, yeah, true. Um, I guess it's still in the duality, in the binary. Yeah, true.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
It's not
Like it's,
necessarily a pretty story. I don't think. I mean, more and more people are going to suffer. The people who suffer the most that I see gut biome issues is it's poor people. It's people who don't have enough money to buy grass-fed butter or even coconut oil or even a decent olive oil. They are eating cheap carbs because that's what's available. And
Mhm.
so and those people are easily enslaved. Those generators are easily enslaved because they don't feel good. When you feel good in your own body, it's really easy to say F you to anything you don't want to do. But when you feel desperate in your body, when you don't trust your own thinking because your gut's full of whatever, then you're much more likely to be enslaved. That's the way I see it. So
Yeah, yeah, I would totally agree with that. And like you say, it's a conditioning field. So
the gut is
in
a
order
conditioning field.
for, yeah, like in order for the food and the gut to be well, in order for us to interact with the outside conditioning field, which is other people, which is planets and transits and all that stuff, like all of that, like it has to be at a level that is well. And if it's not well, then the human suffers. The human suffers.
Mhm. Oh, I just thought of another layer of fear. Germ fear is a big part of why the gut biome is not healthy. All the antibiotic use, and nobody in the United States knows how to ferment a cabbage. I mean, I didn't learn how to ferment a piece of cabbage until I was forced to rebuild my own gut biome. But when, like, traditionally, every household in Europe and all over Asia, most of the world, ferment some vegetables and some salt, and then you have this live culture thing. But people are, we were conditioned in North America, at least, to be so germ phobic that we've actually made ourselves stupider by yeah, the conditioned fear of germs. Yeah.
Mhm. And with the cross of planning and Maya, Gate 32 was available, which is all about the fear of extinction.
Mhm.
And you carry the 5432. So it's the
Mhm.
healing. You get to bring us this healing of that fear of extinction. And how do we heal that?
Oh,
Well, we heal that by being
oh,
well, by, being able to create the transformation inside of us,
yeah, the
right?
transformation is physical. It is physically inside. I've actually done this to a lot of people accidentally. Like several different people have entered cleanses and got done things related to this diet, and I didn't start thinking about that till really recently. It was mostly men that, for one reason or another I related with. But yeah. Yeah, it's like you can't trust that your own ecosystem is healthy until you've really felt it out, investigated it. And there's all these clues like what is it called? Irritable bowel syndrome. One of these biggest
Mm-hmm.
problems in North America, irritable bowel. But nobody's looking at mechanically what does that actually mean? Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Celiac disease too, right? Like that is
Yeah.
like ginormous. And then they also say, and I don't know what your research has indicated, but I've heard that that leaky gut, of course, that autoimmune is they're recognizing that MS, Parkinson's,
Yeah.
ALS, all of these things that actually chew away at the brain,
Yeah.
right? They're all connected with that is because,
Yeah. They chew away
yeah,
at the physical brain because there's chemicals
yes,
in the blood that don't belong there because the gut lining isn't well. So there's literally a lack of wholeness in the human. If your gut lining is not whole, you aren't a separate human and you're being poisoned by what you put in your mouth. Ah, there we go. Talking about the mouth. You're being poisoned by what you put in your mouth if you don't have that tube intact. Yeah.
yeah. So say someone has, it is a vegan, let's just say, okay?
Hmm.
Um, and I recognize that you leaned into animal products to heal that. And, I think that's kind of where I was leaning into, like, if this system's breaking down, what are some other ways that you've learned or maybe are exploring now, like through the vegan process to
Hmm.
heal a gut? What is that? Have you played with that or?
I haven't because I don't know that any of the molecules that come from plants are complex enough to be that molecule that lines that gut wall. Because if you think about what a human is, it's created by our human DNA, right? But what's inside of the gut actually is not human DNA at all. But what is the actual molecule that will fill in there where the body hasn't made it? And I don't know if there's a way to do that. Somebody one time,
Mhm.
one of my former flaming vegan friends had said, something like you could do it with seaweed or something, and I don't,
Mhm.
so I don't know if that's the case. I certainly like eating seaweed and drinking broth from it. Um, but it's mechanical. Like healing the gut is a mechanical issue of molecules and chemistry. So I don't know if anything carbohydrate could go in. Like I said, eating lettuce was painful and it would come out pretty whole. So I don't know what you could, I don't know of a way to do that.
Okay,
The
very,
the
very
the
interesting.
the book, the GAPS diet book, will explain the molecular chemistry of these animal parts. But yeah, veganism is an idea. It does feel good. I mean, I will admit, I felt great for a long time. But then I also got pretty dumb, actually. And I live around a lot of vegan people, like in this expatriate, tropical community, and they're like not very grounded people, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they seem really compassionate and empathetic, but in a way it's also because it seems like there's not really like a wall between them and the rest of the world, like we're talking about with the gut wall. And actually on that topic, I'll mention something. I recently watched a television series which was too violent for me to watch like 10 years ago when it first came out and was super popular, but I watched it last fall, like through Netflix, and I remember thinking, you know what, for most of my life I was too sensitive to watch this artistic thing because of this violence, like it was too personal or something. But watching it this time I was like, yeah, but I'm actually me, and that's not me, and I used to have a porousness to that. But now there's something different, and it could be deconditioning or whatever. But I think it has to do with the fact that at my belly level, which is my brain, like the extension, a whole other brain in my gut, is like really clear. Okay, I'm over here, and that's over there. And now I can say, this is my issue, and that's your issue. And that's safe mentally, right? That's healthy mentally. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it
Hmm.
totally does. Because like at the core, Ra always talked about how the mind is so reactive. And I think as we decondition and we're in our PHS and we've leaned into healing the body and the brain, like now we become creative because we no longer are reacting to what's going on. We trust our decision making and we connect
Yeah.
with wisdom, and and we don't have to be pulled off track and reactive to the conditioning.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you there. And the number one thing that the planet reacts to, in my opinion, it's coffee. And I love coffee. And I mean, I take my times away from it, but it's the most strategic. make you strategic, make you open sacrals, makes us open sacrals work. And it's like the first conditioning thing but there's a reaction, and I spike with the caffeine, and then I want carbohydrates, and then I need some fat to bring it down. And I mean, that's just,
Yeah,
but that's modern. I mean, that's modern diet, that's like European diet, coffee, bread, but
right.
yeah. And that's even with a healthy gut. With an unhealthy gut, I can see that people just get into these cycles, and they eat 14 bananas a day, literally, people like that around here. But the material plane, as you pointed out, the ego's right in the middle. The material plane is
Mm-hmm.
like lost on them. Like they have no idea about the material plane, but the bananas are, they eat bananas. And I'm like, that was me when I showed up here. I was a little more like that. And now I'm a little bit like, I gotta take care of the material plane, and I'll have a banana for dessert every once in a while.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So what was interesting as you were talking like about the bananas and that kind of stuff, um, here's what I recognize as a cattle rancher, because I think my cows provide me with so much wisdom. They're just so
Mhm.
grounded. I just right. And what I recognize that, cows that are in feedlots that are provided like corn and grain, which
Huh?
is very toxic to them because they cannot process it, right?
Right.
So they are wild. They are dangerous and they are wild because there's such a huge amount of sugar, like literally in like creating a toxic animal. So their
Ah,
livers,
yeah.
oftentimes like the butchers that we had for many, many years until they retired, they would say the people that force fed the grain, when they opened up that animal, like the liver was like it
Ooh.
was like hot and
Ah,
just
yeah.
destroyed, right? And then you think, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's the filter. So now all of that is going into the meat and people are
Right.
eating all this toxicity, right? And like you
Right.
can walk into my cattle field that are grass fed and they don't get any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They are so calm. Like
Uh-huh.
any stranger can walk in and you can walk up to my cows, you can pet my cows, you can pet my bulls, you can do whatever. Like they walk up to you for back scratches. And
Hmm.
I was talking to my husband about this and I'm like, what a correlation this is to watch how much sugar humanity is ingesting, like, not real sugar, but like,
Hmm.
and sometimes real sugar, I guess, too. But how much sugar is ingested creates that emotionality of those ginormous spikes,
Ah,
right?
good point. Yeah, the emotionality
Right?
of sugar, totally. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Mhm.
So I like I watch this, when you look at like a dog or a lion or anything that eats meat, they're not like that per se, right? Until they get like some that get treats, maybe
Uh-huh.
because there's all kinds of toxicity in there. They'll get really hyper, but like they're stealthy. They're lean. They are,
If
I don't
they get
know,
to if they get to eat right, you know what? You're reminding me
Yeah.
now. I've got a list of four dogs that I've healed with bone broth now. And two
Okay.
of them are at my friend's house right now here in Costa Rica. They're what we call jungle mutts. They're not very big, they can sit on your lap, but they're just a mix of, whatever. And they're rescued. But I came in to live with them in October. I was their house sitter for a month, and one of them was
Mm.
on expensive medication and had all kinds of like emotional twitchy inflammation, like weird skin things. And okay, he's okay, but and the other one had her little issues and her little nip issues and this and that. Okay, so they're human. Their main human is my friend, and he's got a gate 18 that won't change very fast. Okay, but I laid out the
Yeah.
information, and he's watched me heal another dog. Actually, I healed another dog with bone broth at the same time that I was doing my bone broth healing here in 2016. The first time when I was learning even how to make bone broth, I had a dog. A dog had come to me, and she was all messed up, and she healed with me, and we both looked like good when we came out of it. But these two dogs, these two little dogs, I didn't push it on their human, but he brought in some bone broth in about a month ago and got some other bush meat, he called it, and the one dog's autoimmune stuff is gone, and his all his inflammation went down, and he seems happy. I write messages. I'm, dude, I'm hiking with Buster the dog, and he's not being all weird. He's not doing all his twitchy weird stuff. And the female, she's got like this leaner body and she's not all bitchy at people now. So
Yeah.
literally and he was feeding them bananas every day. He was feeding the
Mm,
dogs bananas every day and then just regular kibble that had, whatever grains in it.
yeah.
Okay. So they're
Yeah.
still getting kibble, but they're not getting bananas anymore. And they are getting bone broth and meat every day. And the dogs have changed shape and attitude totally clearly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that story, but it's true.
Yep, I love it, right? I love
Yeah.
it. And that's where I wonder, like with the cross of planning and this breaking down of that
Yeah.
1949,
Yeah.
like and kind of like back to our conversation around, I have a sense that, the cross of planning is trying to get us into these cities and do all these things, right? And it's designed to do that. But I recognize that people will be leaning back into the natural process of raising mammals versus the confinement because it's
Yeah.
so unnatural.
Well, maybe what it's going to be is something like it's going to go back to just tribal growers and kind of like the small scale
Yeah.
connection with the growers because the big scale, all those levels of bargains won't be sustainable. And so the lucky people who have a network and their cousin knows the person who grows a cow, they're going to get in that network and then people who aren't in that network aren't going to get that as much. That's that's what I see.
Yeah.
Do you remember Ross saying that, he said some things that like, another time he'd say something different. But there was one time
Yeah.
I read, he said, and he liked dogs. He said, I don't plan on having a dog after 2027. As
Right.
if, as if like in the moment, like that would change. Any sense about that?
I'm gonna go back to exactly what we just talked about. I think it's the
Yeah.
food source. I
Uh-huh.
don't think any of these mammals are gonna turn on humans as long as they, exactly what we're
Well,
talking
as
about here,
long
as
as
long
they're
as they're
fed,
healthy and
yeah,
their gut biome as well.
yeah.
I don't think that nature would turn on us like that. I think that the cross of planning leaving is teaching us that a manipulated food source that we've been on for so long has created like all of the human issues on this planet, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
once we go back to a natural food source, whether you're vegan or not, like my animals have the best life. Like people are like, when I come back, I'm coming back as a cow on your cattle ranch because this is the best. And I think that that's where we're going. I think if once the food system is no longer manipulated, which I don't think is gonna like, happen in 2027 like that, it'll slowly break down. And we go back to the more natural way of eating, I think humans will be okay. I really do. I
Lucky
think that
humans will
like,
be okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that, I also think that, like our dogs and our cats and all of that, like, they won't be fed kibble. They won't be, like, they're gonna go back to the natural way of eating.
And that's a lot of work to actually like I
Oh,
think
yeah.
people have been to have animals like domestic animals in the cities that'll probably go away because the
Yes.
ability to get cheap cat food and keep a cat inside won't make sense anymore, right?
No.
And
Yeah.
the organization necessary to like have dogs defecating in a city. I mean, there's actually a lot of like elements to
Right.
getting dog poop out of a city. So the ability to keep them, so no, that part will change. A woman who's into human design here, I mean, the first manifestor I ever met, second, she's emotional and she likes dogs and she's had some like serious dogs. She feeds them bones directly. She's definitely the
Yeah.
controller. She's a gate 21. She gives the meat. And but she says she didn't understand about the 1949 breaking down. But she said she just watches in this little village that she lives in. She watches the packs of dogs, and she says that she has these
Mm,
visions that the packs of dogs are going to get more and more aggressive into the future. And she didn't know about 1949 breaking down, but she said to me something like, I say, as 2027 comes, I think I'm seeing that these packs of dogs are going to get more and more violent and people are going to be hurt. Like they're not going to be in control. Like these packs I'm seeing are not controlled by humans the way Does that make sense? I don't think it's happening in Alberta because it's too cold. Right?
You're totally right on that. And what I recognize is that those dogs are eating the scraps, right? Whatever's
They're
left.
eating bananas, right? They're eating pizza
That's
crust. They're
right.
eating, yeah. So they're going to be the crazy dogs. And I
Yeah.
already know it's the crazy dogs that bite people. It's the poor
Yes.
crazy dogs that will do violent things. You know, a dog who's getting well fed, it doesn't have to do anything else.
That's right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
But
We could talk,
it's a lot
I
of work
think,
to
all
feed
day.
animals. Yeah.
It is, and I like your perspective saying, probably in the cities, no, it's not going to be possible. There's not going to be human food going in there, right? Like it's going to be hard to get human food. So to feed an animal is probably going to be like such an outrageous price that it'll
Yeah.
be like, it won't be realistic. But for anybody that is still quote unquote allowed to be on their land, if the WEF has anything to say with it, it's a totally different story. Like I have a ginormous Great Pyrenees and like he's intimidating, he does his job, but he would never attack a human being because he has no need to attack a human being, right?
Yeah.
He's not looking for food. He's well fed.
Mm. Well, I don't know where to go next. Do you have an idea? I feel good, but I know we could talk more about it.
Yeah,
Was there
I
anything
know.
that we wanted to talk to PHS and the biome? Because that was the connection I wanted to take. I wanted to make sure that I could meet whoever I can meet who might see these relationships and whether, like, for example, I think there could be an experiment. There
Yes.
maybe should be an experiment, right? You know how fun it is to get funding for experiments, but
Yeah.
but in my experiment that my benefactor funds, I would find people in human design who are like, yeah, I'd be willing to try my PHS, and I'm willing to try doing it like a gut cleanse and like before it, like some kind of stage to get in there to get rid of the crap that has been hanging around in there forever, conditioning you since you were a child, perhaps, and then clear them out and then say, you want to just try eating, in the sunlight? Does that make sense?
Right.
Do you think there's any possibility of that happening?
I would say 100% there's a possibility. Because and I want to bring this like kind of like the PHS area, but it's also that decision making. When the gut's not healthy, we can try to eat our PHS, how our PHS
Right,
is.
right.
But
But
if
it's
it's
just
not
mental.
correct, right,
Hmm.
it'll the decision making ends up never being able to be connected to that strategy and authority because all of that stuff is still wonky.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
would totally see how, if anybody here in the audience, you guys want to connect with ISA and lean into clearing out and cleaning up and rebuilding that biome so it's not working against you, so that it is
Yes,
a partner in this process, right?
that's a good way to put it because it is probably
Yeah,
working against you if it's not working for you. And you're a
that's right.
model of health and sanity if it is working for you. And all these kinds of things that people can like really beat up on themselves about, including me, like all my weirdo fantasies that I had for so long, I think was related to the fact that I just wasn't grounded in my own gut. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think that people could connect with their decision making. Um, because the body is, there's like, not only is it electromagnetic, but it's chemical. So
Yes.
if our chemicals aren't correct, right? I look at just
Yes.
the sacral center.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the ovaries and testes and our estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone is not correct, that sacral will always be pulled into shiny object syndrome because it's mental, right? It's trying
Yes.
to relieve some kind of pressure, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I totally believe that it all comes down to what we've been ingesting, what we've been eating.
A pure generator, a non-emotional, asked me this question the other day in his kitchen. He was like, he held up a loaf of bread. He really likes bread. He's like, Isa, how do I tell if you ask me, do you want this bread? And I go, how do I know that it's me and not my sacral, or
Yes.
but it's my sacral and not the like the candida gut. And I said, great question. You totally get the question. And I don't know because for one, I'm not sacral, but I also think there's uh a sensitivity to food that you have to figure out perhaps first. Because, for example, hey, do you want to go to the meeting of the Young Democrats Club at the university, blah, blah, blah? They're doing free pizza. Oh, yeah, I'll go free pizza, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people can
Mm-hmm.
get lured into so many things and get conditioned by what's going on in the environment where they're being given food. And that's something that Europeans, I was once on a sailboat and I asked Europeans, like, what was so weird about when you were in New York City? What was weird about Europeans? They were like, they will go places for free food. Why would you go to a meeting to get free pizza? But all over university, free pizza was the
Wow.
draw, right? And then I learned in my
Okay.
own low sound eating that I was going to bars and nice food places to get the exact little food thing that I wanted, taste transference. And then I was taking in all the vibes of all the people and everything they were talking about. So I was being ultra conditioned because I was chasing taste, but the sounds that were coming in was what was conditioning me for the rest of the week. So to separate out what is really my response and what is actually just,
Mm-hmm.
the gut bacteria that want bread or, whatever. I'm not saying bread is bad, by the way, it's the most
No,
wonderful thing
no, no.
ever.
Yep.
I'm just saying
Yep.
that
Yep.
you can have an imbalance of what is going on in there that will only crave certain foods and then just cut everything else out. And those carb seeking ones can be the craziest. Yeah.
Yep. And then as you were talking and you were talking about like why do we follow that quote unquote marketing of, oh, there's free food included in here. And then I lean back into that 4426 because that's the
Yeah.
sales channel, that's the marketing channel, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah.
connected to that 4037. And I like, as someone who's online, right? Like that's where I market everything and I watch how
Yep.
people market. And it is so, so manipulative and unhealthy how so many coaches market and all of that, right? They're getting you to
Uh-huh.
chase a dollar instead of looking at the transformation,
I hear you.
right?
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, that is
So
brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. And the
yeah,
transformation is a root spleen thing, but the other one has the
yes,
ego, and the ego is
yeah,
willing to lie even to get that done. But
yes,
you know what?
yeah,
You don't go get that free pizza, that cheap free pizza, if you already feel satisfied in your body.
right,
If you already
yeah,
know, like, I woke up this morning and I needed a smoothie, so I had a smoothie, so I don't need to go get, or whatever satisfies you. If you're already satisfied in your body, you're not seeking cheap food, but that's the American diet or the North American diet.
mm-hmm,
Just add a few
yep,
Red Bulls.
right. And again, you play with that food, that cross of planning, 3740,
Yeah,
you play with that
yeah,
food, and then you can manipulate and market to a conditioned mind all day long. And
yeah.
people are trying to make decisions with their mind. And you can
Yes,
totally manipulate that every day, all day long. You
very
can
much.
transmit whatever persuasive, manipulative energy through an unhealthy gut.
Yes, yes, that's brilliant. And this might be a good place to end. I'm not sure, but once you're in your once you're in your PHS eating, when you really feel that, that is, to me, that's when you can't be manipulated anymore because you have a sense of your own determination
Yes.
and you're like, that's not me. And
Yep.
then you can't make me eat a free pizza. You could put free food, pile of food in front of me, and I just simply won't
Mm-hmm.
eat it because it's not me, it's not the right time, not the right place.
Yep.
So the kind of, okay, there we go. Because if you have your determination going on through your PHS eating and your gut biome is balanced, people can't control you and manipulate you. That's true.
No.
Okay, there you go. That's the independence of the potential future is
Yeah.
having your own thing going on that way, not manipulatable by other people's food concepts.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's some
Love
independence
it.
there. Yeah.
It
I
totally
love it
is. It
too.
totally is.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I
Yeah.
would like to empower and support people into that kind of independence. Okay, that's what I
Excellent.
would like to do. Yes, and
Awesome.
I
Nice.
hear you do. I hear you doing that too, especially with your admonition about managing energy rather than time.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. same
Yeah.
same kind of independence possible that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, audience. Whew, this was a good one. Thank you, Isa, for your time.
Thank you for your energy and the yeah.
Yeah, you bet. Everything that you guys need to connect with Isa is going to be in the description below of this
Cool.
video. Okay.
Okay.
So your website will be there. They can connect with you, have conversations, see how they can open this up to healing their gut biome and really connecting with their primary health system so that they can make decisions from their monopole versus
Mm-hmm.
conditioning, right?
Yay.
Awesome.
Okay. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
So
Thank you so much, Leann.
is there anything else you want to drop in? Any last words that you feel might just land with the audience?
Love yourself through your own mouth.
I love it.
Are you
Awesome.
ready to love yourself through your own mouth?
There you go. I love it.
Okay.
Love it.
Cool.
All right. I'm going to just push stop and I'll just ask you to stay a little bit longer. Thank you, everybody.